why DC Statehood matters to America and all matters related to DC statehood. My name is Bo Schuff. I'll be your host this afternoon as usual, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of DC Vote. We're here at the beautiful Eaton, DC. Our partner for Statehood Matters, our every 2-week sort of podcast. For our new listeners, DC is home to 455,000 people from all backgrounds, walks of life, and occupations, and I'm excited to be joined today by one who represents an issue and an organization that maybe surprisingly, but significantly, intersects with the efforts for statehood. I'm joined by Justin Strakel of Normal. Originally, we were also supposed to be joined by Brad Lewis with Anacostia Organics, but some unfortunate scheduling challenges arose and he's not able to be with us today. We will look to have him on a different program. But in any case, Justin, it is great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Bo. Always a privilege to get to talk about how cannabis policy intersects with other aspects in our society.
I appreciate it. One thing that all of us who do live in D.C. have in common is the reality of taxation without representation and living under the original form of voter suppression. Because D.C. is not a state, the residents here have no representation in the U.S. Senate, and we have no vote in the U.S. House. Our delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, was with us on the last episode and made sure that I languaged that we have no vote in the House, because we absolutely have an advocate and representation, but no vote. Our goal here is to help the rest of the country understand what that means exactly, that we have no representation and why statehood matters. As much as I am excited to get started with this conversation, let me run through a couple of statehood matters. Since our last podcast, we've reached a new milestone in the effort to secure co-sponsors on H.R. 51, the statehood bill. Representative Gil Cisneros of California and Representative Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey have signed on as our newest co-sponsors, and we now sit at 218. For those of you who think that means we have a majority, we're just shy in that 3 of our co-sponsors, our own delegate along with 2 others, have no vote in the House. So we have 215 votes and 218 co-sponsors. So we need 3 more votes still in order to get to that majority, which we think we're going to get to. Speaking of which, the hearing for the statehood bill is coming. After being bumped because of the Mueller hearing, we are back on September 19th at 10 a.m. in Rayburn House Office Building, room 2154. If you aren't able to be in D.C., if you're watching from somewhere else, you'll be able to stream that on the Government Oversight and Reform Committee's website. If you are anywhere within the D.C. area or have means to get here for that day, we want everybody to show up for D.C. In fact, you can find all the information about that hearing at showupfordc.com. That's showup4 is the number 4, not the letters, .com, not .org, in case there's anybody somewhere who might be confused. It's showup4dc.com. But now on to the real reason here, our conversation with Justin. Thank you again for joining us. Your organization is NORMAL, which is the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, if I got my acronym right.
Right enough.
Close. What did I get wrong?
The National Organization for the Reform of marijuana laws.
That's a whole lot of missing letters.
I know. These things don't matter.
Can you talk a little bit about the work that your organization does? A lot of our listeners may not be familiar with NORMAL or the cannabis community, and starting with really like the national pieces and the work that you guys do there.
Yeah, well, NORMAL was founded in 1970 by a young attorney who at the time was interested in dodging the draft and smoking pot. And at the time, this is, to put it in the context, President Nixon's in the White House.
He didn't have bone spurs?
He did not have bone spurs.
Unfortunate for him.
He was a conscientious objector to the war in Vietnam, and he was working on the Hill at the time as a young staffer in a Senate office, and he saw a real opportunity to organize attorneys and activists who were looking for ways to fight back against the administration and their escalation of the war and their escalation of draconian policies here at home. So looking at the Nixon administration's growing, war on drugs, they saw a real opportunity to catalyze support around cannabis. And because before then, there had been a couple other smaller groups that had been doing some really good local organizing, but no one had really taken that mantle at the national level to really shine a light on the possibility for our fellow citizens to get organized, get engaged, and change the laws. So since 1970, NORMAL's been around. We have citizen-led chapters all around the country. We have over 160 chapters here in the U.S., and we have a number of internationals as well that are all organized to the ability of those who have stepped up in their communities to take the reins. So, for all your listeners who understand grassroots organizing,
I'm not sure I understand grassroots organizing, even though I do it on a daily basis. I don't know that we can really ever have a comprehension of what it looks like.
We're doing the best we can with the limited knowledge that we can, the limited time that we can, the limited finances that we can, the limited attention span of our fellow citizens that we can. It's hard work putting in the shoe leather and the elbow grease to get things done. And particularly in a time when there are so many problems facing the day-to-day of our brothers and sisters in our communities.
Right.
So, we're incredibly fortunate to have some amazing activists and advocates and just people who are fed up and they say, damn it, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear a little bit on the podcast.
It's internet radio. You can do pretty much anything you want.
Yeah. Who say, you know what, I might not be able to solve some of the biggest problems, but this is an issue that's important to me. This is an issue that might be very important to my family, and I can stand up and I can make change happen when no one else will. Because at the end of the day, my favorite protest sign I've ever seen is someone was standing on the corner and their sign read, "I kept on asking why won't someone do something, and then I realized I was someone." Yeah. And hands down, we're Normal is very fortunate. We need more folks all around the country. So for those who might be interested in cannabis activism and reforming laws at their state and local level and helping pitch into reform at the federal level, NORML.org. Got to make the plug.
Of course.
And
of course.
But no, we got a lot of people. Right now, state legislatures are closed. Mm-hmm. But particularly in the states that are enacting their legal or either adult use or medical programs, there are so many important policies at the local level that are getting decided on a regular basis, and we need to make sure that those policies represent the rights of individuals. And we're not just seeing some cacophony of policies being set for a big cannabis and a corporate takeover of what could be the largest sector or our new cash crop in this country.
Sure. Can you talk actually a little bit about the state and local efforts? It seems to me like the states are really leading the way on this issue. I know that we need to decriminalize it or remove it from Schedule 1.
Yeah.
I don't know all the language here, so definitely
no worries.
Correct me when I
you're
goof
good.
it. But there are states leading the way. How does that work? How does a state legalize it, but it's still illegal at the federal level? And what does that mean for the folks that live there day to day?
It's absolutely absurd, the things we choose to care about here in our loosely organized society. Right now there are 11 states that have legalized the adult use of marijuana, and 33 states that have done a medical program for the cultivation, manufacture, production, and distribution of cannabis. They are all doing so in clear defiance of federal prohibition. Traditionally, when we think of our federalist structure and some powers are left to the states, and in states some powers are left to it's going to be your local city council that you want to argue about which specific potholes you want filled. But it's your state government that you want to argue about that we need more funding.
Road, not holes related
to
marijuana.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
I'll go with that. Any chance I have to make the dad joke, I'm going to take it. So.
No, hey, Robin Williams used to like to joke about we need to legalize pot to fill the potholes. So
that actually makes sense.
Whatever, we're not too prescriptive on what the revenue generated from the taxes should be for. With the exception of, we do say absolutely we should expunge criminal records, but that's a different story.
Right.
But no, there's everything from at the local level. A lot of areas in California and other legal states have actually prevented the distribution of marijuana in their jurisdictions. So just like today, there are still a couple counties dotting the countryside where they ban the sale of alcohol,
right,
which is a hangover from alcohol prohibition. We're now seeing 75% of the land in California you wouldn't be able to get a license to sell marijuana. So it's going to take time. It's going to take
So even though California's legalized it, 70% of the property or the land within the state
jurisdictions. Traditionally, it's that's not to say population. It's
Right,
to say
right,
I was specific by saying land because it's
Senate
the very large rural areas. There is where voters may still, or communities and their elected officials may still be a little hesitant. We are seeing those start to flip back, or flip on, I should say.
Right.
But these things take time, and it takes lawmakers and elected officials, if nothing else, are simply motivated by their own self-interest. And if they don't believe that their political position could be threatened for not changing a position, then they're not going to change their position.
That's right.
Especially when we see sheriff's associations all around the country and the national groups so strongly coming out in opposition to reform. And it's predicated for a number of reasons. Everybody has their own favorite data points that they like to point to. Mine is actually, if we look at what happens in states that have legalized and what happens at traffic stops, we have seen an incredible reduction in the number of traffic stops that result in a search without a warrant. Some new data that was put out by the Marshall Project, they showed that the overall number of stops that resulted in searches declined by 50%, and the racial disparity amongst those who have had their cars searched declined by 66%. And that's because of one thing I haven't said yet, but it's important that we talk about every time we talk about criminalization.
Sure.
Is who's being arrested,
Right.
who's being put in the back of cop cars, who's being put in jail, who's getting the charges, pressed by the DA, who's having to go to courtrooms,
Right.
and the racial disparity in this country is nationwide 4-1 between black and white, despite similar consumption rates. And right across the river, it's 8-1. Just marijuana-related crimes.
It's 4-1.
Yeah.
And just across the river.
In Arlington County, it's 8-1.
Just in the county or in Virginia?
In Arlington County.
In Arlington County, it's 8-1.
Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, it's about, I think it's like 5.7-1.
And so you talked about the reduction in searches. So that leads you to believe that previously they'd pull somebody over and just based on nothing, based on a smell, based on a gut feeling, based on racial profiling, they would then search the car without a warrant and try to find some sort of thing to hang somebody on. Yep.
Now, I personally, I got interested in marijuana policy. I got interested in marijuana when I was a little bit younger, but I got interested in marijuana policy when I was working in the state of Virginia as a legislative aide for a senator who had introduced a decriminalization bill. And I remember the Commonwealth's attorneys a year and a half later came out, and this is back when I was at Normal, and I testified against them to the State Crime Commission, and they said, we don't take a position on whether or not marijuana should be decriminalized, but we do take a position on removing the ability for law enforcement to search a motor vehicle. And again, they're using it as it's the escalation effect. Oh, well, if there's the smell of marijuana, then they're likely to be breaking other laws, this, that, the other thing, which is certainly not a correlation that we see in any hard facts. But, it's at the end of the day, law enforcement, a lot of them do have this real belief that is if they are flexing their ability to interfere with citizens, and if they are perpetually making their presence known, then they are going to deter crime under the broken windows theory of policing, which has largely been completely been debunked and has destroyed communities, but they don't want to give it up.
So basically they're using marijuana laws as a gateway drug to be able to find other crimes.
Yep. The most harmful thing about marijuana is the fact that it's criminalized.
What do you mean by that?
If we're talking about who is hurt as a result of a substance, if you go into a McDonald's and you eat McDonald's once, you should be fine. You go into McDonald's 3 times a day and have meals every day.
I'm starting to feel very personally attacked by
I love to rag on McDonald's. No, don't get it twisted. I had it a couple days ago when I was on the road, but no, it's about what are the actual effects of a substance, and when we put it into the context, the addiction profile for marijuana is lower than coffee.
Now I'm feeling very attacked.
Cheers. For those of you listening at home, I just raised my coffee cup. I have
iced
4
coffee,
cups
too,
a day.
which is-
When we look at the impairment factors when it comes to driving while quote unquote stoned, the likelihood to get in an automobile accident is lower than if you're changing the radio while you're driving. If
not to mention texting, checking. Your
not to
Google
mention
Maps,
not to mention all of the other
emailing
things
the
that we
50
can do.
people,
Yes.
turning your Spotify on.
Yeah, screaming at the kids in the back seat. There's a lot of ways that we talk about, the dangers of marijuana that are just either predicated on decades of government-sponsored propaganda about the substance, which was largely propagated on racial animus, which is why we call it marijuana in the law, not cannabis. We used to all call it cannabis. But then Harry Anslinger decided that marijuana was a better rhetoric to use against Mexicans, so he started calling it the devil's lettuce and the dangerous marijuana. It's by every metric, cannabis is a safer substance than a litany of already legal substances.
Right.
But the harms of getting a criminal record, particularly if you're a poor individual,
Right.
or if you're not friends with the mayor, or you don't have attorneys who I just keep on personally attacking, or if you don't have that attorney uncle who's gonna do work pro bono for you, you don't have the parental basic income to carry you out. Having that criminal record makes it harder for you to get a job.
Right.
It makes it harder for you to get access to higher education. It makes it harder for you to get access to housing. It makes it harder for you to get which then leads you're less likely to have health care.
Right.
You're less likely to be able to support a family. You're less likely to be able to continue to be a part of your family. You're
Right.
more and in this country, it is expensive to be poor. And with so many barriers to getting records sealed or expunged, that one interaction with law enforcement could haunt you for the rest of your life. Even if that even if that charge is only on your record for a couple years, we look at law enforcement disproportionately targets young black men.
Right.
You're 18 years old, you got a criminal record, and you only have it on your record for 3 years. Those are 3 of your prime years to get your affairs in order, to build a strong foundation,
sure.
right? That means if you were going to school, you just lost the ability to get access to higher education for 7 years,
Right.
if you needed the federal financial aid. If you wanted to get a job, good luck.
A conviction for marijuana will deny your ability to get federal financial aid for 7 years.
Up to 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there is now a process.
Raids going on over at GW in Thurston Hall.
No, those white kids are fine. Now they have amended it. There is a process where you can get one marijuana charge overlooked on the condition that you take a course. That you take a course of a drug and alcohol dependency, and you pay for drug testing and all these other barriers. That again, we're talking about people who are already not in a great capitalized position. They don't have the money. But we're putting up these barriers for them to make it harder for them to put themselves in a position to make money.
And meanwhile, not only should it not be a deterrent, because we've established that it's safer than a ton of things that are already out there, it's not even acting as a deterrent, I would assume, as
Absolutely
we see
not.
cannabis consumption increasing, from my understanding.
Nope. Cannabis consumption is increasing, but the sector of the population that's increasing by within the legal states is the senior community.
Interesting.
Because grandma and grandpa are getting stoned. They it's.
I need to double check brownies when I visit family. Apparently.
Yeah, you do. No, I mean, and part of that is the splash effects of a variety of legal products being out there. My grandfather tried a hemp cream for the first time just a couple months ago. He's 90 years old, and he used it for his arthritis. Okay. And he was great. So they don't. There's still that fear of the smoking of it, but it's amazing the psychological effects of, for the greatest generation on their adherence to the law and order, versus younger people who are like, look, this is a substance that I enjoy. Right. This might be I might prefer smoking a joint to having a whiskey. I might prefer to have a joint with my whiskey, with a side of whiskey. But it's when we're talking about, again, the most dangerous aspect of it is the fact is if I get caught. And personally, I got into this space. What drives me is that exact problem. I was arrested with one of my best friends when I was a kid, and exact same charges, exact same day. Went to the judge, and I got 40 hours of community service and court costs, and he got court costs, a $500 fine. He had to go to a drug and alcoholics dependency class. He had to take drug testing. I was able to get my record expunged 6 months later. He had to wait at least a year. And for those of you on the radio, I am a basic white guy, and he was not. And that was the only difference between us.
That's amazing.
So
it's just disgusting.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little bit. So we've sort of been narrowing it down. We started with the national.
We started big picture.
We talked about the states that are legalizing. I actually wasn't aware that it was 33 on the medical end of things. I want to come back to actually the differences.
Yep. Yeah.
But for now, let's talk a little bit about DC. Connected a little bit more to the statehood effort. So here in DC, my understanding is we've come a pretty long way, sort of, towards legalization of cannabis. The mayor's recently, I know, put out a proposal to I believe, legalize it. The decriminalization sort of already happened. Again, sort of, which we can get to.
Yeah.
Legalizing it is different from decriminalizing it, which is also different from legalizing it for medicinal purposes. Where are we now? Where are we in the district? Where do we stand? What got us here, and where, and what's not happening yet?
So, DC is one of those areas where the language matters, but sometimes the talking point trumps the language mattering. Okay. Everybody here refers to DC as being legalized. And there are definitions of legalization that DC falls under, but it'd be more appropriately just to call it depenalized.
Depenalized.
Yes, because we don't have the mechanisms.
Of the other three terms, you're going to give me a new term.
I'm going to give you a whole new term.
All right,
so in that regard, DC is only similar to Vermont. And Vermont was the first state to legislatively pass a bill to remove the criminal penalties for personal possession and personal limited home cultivation of marijuana. So when we think legalize, we think, we live in a capitalist society, we live in a consumer-oriented society. Legalize should mean you can purchase it. You can't do that here. You could still purchase it the old kind of ways, but you can't legally purchase
you can't walk into a store
here without a medical card, and we'll get into the medical in a second. But yeah, so DC would be aptly described as depenalized. Okay. A lot of people here like to get cute and say that they're navigating the gray area of the law and that they are I-71 compliant, and meaning that it is legal in the District of Columbia to gift up to 2 ounces up to 1 ounce of marijuana. Right. So if I had it on me, which I don't, I apologize. I could hand you an ounce as long as I expect no remuneration whatsoever. So what a lot of people here in the district are doing is they say, listen, if you buy this T-shirt from me for $60, it's a very fine T-shirt.
It's a very fancy T-shirt.
I will, as a thank you for purchasing this T-shirt, gift you an eighth of marijuana. And while it's a great setup, and you know what, for the most part, law enforcement's been pretty cool for those of whom they've caught to not give them charges. Right. They technically are, they're violating the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. Okay. But for the most part, law enforcement has been, as long as there hasn't been complaints on pop-up shops or farmers markets or as long as there haven't been complaints, law enforcement's been some people might take objection from me, and I can't say every single interaction has been cool, but for the most part they've been cool. But here you can legally purchase marijuana if you are a medical patient. Okay. DC has a fairly patient-centric program where a physician can offer a medical marijuana recommendation, which is just a piece of paperwork, and then you get the recommendation, you can get a card, and you can go to one of the fine 5 establishments throughout the city. where
Just let me
we're
plug Anacostia Organics.
plug
They were
Anacostia.
supposed to be here today.
Anacostia Organics was supposed to be
It's
here
the
today.
only, I believe it's the first, if not the only one, on the other
Southeast.
side,
Yep.
on the other side of the Anacostia River. So,
Yep.
we were there for the press conference.
Mhm.
It's a great establishment, from what I understand, and
Yes.
from my own observation. So let me throw a plug in. But
Yeah, no, and Linda Mercator Green, the owner of the establishment, she's great. I was very fortunate to get to speak at the press conference with
Yeah.
the mayor, rolling out her initiative to set up a regulatory structure. But yeah, I mean, there are 5 other dispensaries. I will also shout out Shonda over at National Holistic, Shonda Messias, who is also the head of Women Grow Nationally, which is an organization that helps empower female entrepreneurs to get into the marijuana legal marketplace. So we work closely with her on those kind of issues and promoting equity. But no, so you need the medical card. DC just flipped on what we refer to as reciprocity.
I saw that, yeah.
If you are from one of the 33 states, and as a DC resident, I have to shame myself because I should have said earlier 11 states plus DC and 33 states plus DC. Which gets to the heart of why we're here.
Right.
It should be 12 and 34. When you come here, if you have your medical card with you, you will be able to go and get your medication at one of those 5 dispensaries.
Oh, okay, great.
So that is new. It's posing some challenges for the market, but I'll let the capitalists talk about that. I'm not here to talk about market fluctuations as a result of consumer demand and whatever.
So the depenalization came about from, and you mentioned I-71, which is not an interstate freeway. It's Initiative 71.
Initiative 71.
That which passed overwhelmingly.
71% of the vote.
So that's easy to remember.
I think
not.
72 maybe.
The mayor has talked about a regulatory scheme, as you mentioned. We have medicinal sort of. What keeps us from doing what Colorado's done, what California's done, and the other 9?
And that is why I am here.
Back to the center, right?
Now we come to the intersection of why I am so proud to always stand with you guys and talk about the need for statehood and what's going on in Congress. Because unfortunately, as a result of DC not being a state and not having its ability for self-determination and self-governance and lack of representation and a vote in Congress, a certain member of the Maryland delegation, his name is Andy Harris. He decided that
listeners to our show will
y'all know Andy Harris.
Recognize his name from the glorious wet wipe.
Yeah. He God, that was a good one. He often likes to fancy himself as as a city council person or possibly even the mayor of DC. And he does sit on one of the most powerful committees in the Congress, which is the Appropriations Committee. And through the Appropriations Committee must go the DC budget.
Right.
Through a rider that he had previously offered, it restricted the ability for DC to set up a scheme where they would collect tax revenue from adult use marijuana. Right. And, as well-intentioned as the mayor and the administration and the city is, they're not going to, they've yet to violate federal law on that spending appropriations rider to set up a regulatory structure. Right. And this is one of those areas where, as a consumer's advocate myself, it's a challenging place to be in because we very much want thoughtful pro-consumer regulations to ensure product safety, to ensure that consumers are going to know what it is they're getting and they have proper labeling standards, those kind of things. And to do that, we need government. We need a couple bureaucrats who are thoughtful and who are making sure that these companies aren't pulling one over and we're going to have safe products. Right.
And we need some bureaucrats to cash the checks.
Yeah. And listen, the revolution needs good bureaucrats. Like I think that's one of the things that is so often left out. No matter what size or scope of government you believe in,
we do in fact need some.
Regardless of how many bureaucrats it's going to be, you want them to be good.
Well, but yeah, there's a disagreement there.
Yeah. And this is one of those areas, so the mayor recently introduced her own legislation
Right.
that to the city council for them to take up the Safe Cannabis Sales Act, and it's a pretty good bill. We think that her team was pretty thoughtful in putting it together. We were appreciative that they included the sealing of criminal records.
Right.
We'd like to see the expungement of criminal records.
What's
but,
the difference? Just for folks who...
Law enforcement can still see them.
Oh, okay.
So I was proud to stand next to the mayor as she introduced the bill.
Yep.
We'd privately said our concerns, and now we're publicly saying our concerns. But no, we're still very much in favor of the bill. And it's, really how they prioritized keeping it locally owned, we think is incredibly important.
Yeah, the requirements for percentage of ownership, even percentage of employees, right?
Yes.
Of DC residents having to work in this industry and at these locations. And it's not just about regulating sales. My understanding, it's also regulating testing and making sure that there's a scheme in place to make sure it is all safe and such.
Yep.
How does... and it goes beyond sort of just our lack of statehood, right? It is... We're talking about local dollars that are not allowed to be used.
Yep. So
Congressman Harris from somewhere in Maryland has said we can't spend our own local money to set up our own local system. I just sort of wonder what would happen if he told that to the governor of Colorado. I mean, it's just when for DC residents, what have these states that have legalized legalized adult sale and regulation, what have they seen as the impact as far as revenue, as far as increase or decrease in crime, increase or decrease in use? Like, what are the... I think Colorado was one of the first, right?
Yes.
Or they just
Colorado and Washington were the first two at the same time.
And so they have sort of the most history. What have we learned from those entities, and what lessons should we be sharing with Mr. Harris about what this actually looks like?
Well, the premise of your question is based on the assumption that Andy Harris can be rational and assess data, but if we put Andy Harris being a good faith actor aside and just address the crux of the question, earlier I cited the Marshall Project data about the traffic violations or stops that lead to searches. There was one report that I saw come out of Denver that they saw a 50% rise in arson, but that was because it went from 2 instances to 3 instances in the same context. So I know.
Yeah.
There was a really popular bear attack recently where a bear attacked a dumpster outside of a dispensary and actually stole the dumpster in Colorado. No, I mean, honestly, the sky hasn't fallen.
Right.
The states collected, I think Colorado just passed the $1 billion in tax revenue mark since the implementation of legalization. So, they're building and renovating schools with their tax dollars. States can choose what they want to do with how they set up those tax structures. It's our belief that the tax revenue or the tax rates should be set high enough to support a regulatory structure that's pro-consumer. We do firmly believe that some of that tax revenue should go to expunge the criminal records, because doing that work isn't free.
Sure.
So we should pay for it.
More good bureaucrats.
More good bureaucrats. And then should the legislators or should the policymakers want to have a little bit of additional revenue go to something else good for their community, great. Sure. We're not prescriptive of what that is. Colorado did schools, Washington did public health. It's a choose your own adventure if you're a local lawmaker. But one thing we have seen, just as a cautionary tale here for local lawmakers, is California did levy some pretty high tax rates. And that has led legal marijuana to not be as competitive with the existing underground marketplace.
Oh, okay.
So we're still seeing a lot of the marijuana commerce still continuing out of the legal market. But that's also, we're talking about decades of a economy that was all based on, hey, that guy,
right.
and just because there's a store down the street, especially if that store is more expensive than the guy, you're still going to go to the guy.
Well, especially when law enforcement is no longer as concerned about it as they were anyway.
But one thing that everybody's concerned about, and they're, being concerned about it is rational, but not acknowledging the data is irrational. we have seen a overall decline in traffic-related fatalities in Colorado. Now, there has been an increase in the data that's been collected showing that traffic fatalities had an individual who had marijuana in their system. That is true. But that data is being used to misrepresent the actual raw number of how many people are being hurt in traffic accidents. And those numbers has gone down.
Is it just that stores are closer than dealers?
Well, it's I mean, a lot of it is a decline in drunk driving.
Oh, okay.
But it's worth noting, and I want to acknowledge when we see pieces of data that don't necessarily say, hey, yeah, let's jump on the legalization train. But no, the Colorado changed the way that they collected that data as well. They used to only collect the data should the officer at the scene say, hey, we should do a drug test. Now they drug test every single person.
Oh, really?
So of course you're going to get more hits too.
More. Yeah,
but overall traffic fatalities has gone down.
Okay.
And so there are concerns about impaired driving. I think we need to be thoughtful about it. We need to not set up a per se standard here. That would be a blood test, because that doesn't correlate to whether or not you're impaired. I smoked a joint a week ago. I would test positive right now.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that if I hop in my car this evening to go to the grocery store that I'm stoned.
Right.
So there are thoughtful regulations that need to be done. But unfortunately, Andy Harris is not a thoughtful individual.
No. Let's flip the script a little bit. So we've talked about why statehood advocates should care about marijuana and especially why DC residents should see the link between the two.
And show up on September 19th.
I appreciate that. What about folks outside of folks in Colorado or Washington who care about cannabis legalization, who care about this? Why should they care about the statehood side? What argument do you make to them, if any, to move them to action and engagement?
Well, it depends on how hardcore pro-marijuana you are as to your level of engagement here. If you're really, really dedicated, you really want to go with surgical precision, contact all the lawmakers on the Senate Appropriations Committee,
right,
and tell them you don't want to see that the Harris rider included. Or on the Senate side, it's actually Senator Lankford who did it, Republican of Oklahoma, who actually hates marijuana so much he cut his own video and put it on the air in Oklahoma when they had their medical marijuana initiative just a year and a half ago. He said God didn't want medical marijuana legalized, so I guess he wants people to suffer. But that's Senator Lankford. But just broadly, the statehood argument, aside from just being in solidarity with the fact that over 700,000 of Americans are disenfranchised, it's good for them if they ever want to come visit DC. Period. Sure. I mean, if you want to motivate somebody out of their pure self-interest, most Americans throughout their life at some point, and I'm totally guessing here, will visit the nation's capital at some point. So if you come here, wouldn't you like to be able to legally enjoy some marijuana? We're talking about one of the aspects that we've yet to see implemented yet, but it's only a matter of time, is marijuana bars. And how do we set the indoor smoking regulations and all those other things, which are super local issues.
Sure.
But I can't think of any better way for a citizen of this country who came to DC to make their grievances heard and to go lobby their government on whatever it is, to at the end of the day treat themselves with being able to stop into a locally owned DC establishment and spark up a fat one. Reward yourself when you do a good citizen active citizenry, I should say. So it's just good sense. At the end of the day, the fact that we're here in the nation's capital, the nation's capital's residents have voted to legalize marijuana, because every intention when they voted to depenalize, the city council was ready to set up a regulatory structure.
I don't think anybody went to the ballot box saying, no, I really like this half measure, but I wouldn't go any farther than that.
And if and again, just for cannabis advocates' own self-interest back in their home jurisdictions, if we can regulate it here, if I can organize congressional delegations or CODELs down the block to an adult use dispensary, and I can take those lawmakers who are a little curious, feeling a little experimental, in even just seeing
maybe
something.
Congress would just work better overall.
I mean, maybe they would.
If they could chill just a little bit.
I mean, hey, I have, taking off my normal hat, I have this wacky theory where I think we should put Congress in government housing, like just buy an old hotel and make them all live in the hotel so that they have to talk to one another. Like, you throw a little marijuana lounge on the top of that hotel, we might be able to get some things
there
done.
You go.
Yeah. No, I think the implementation of a marketplace here will further hasten the destigmatization of legalization, which will hasten the ending of federal marijuana criminalization, which will hasten states reforming their laws to be in compliance with the fact that we now have majority public support for outright legalization, including Democrats, independents, and since 2017, we've yet to see a poll that doesn't include more than 50% of Republicans supporting legalization.
Well, and even some big name Republicans. John Boehner is big on the marijuana now.
JB's on the board. John Boehner's former speaker, John Boehner, is now on the board of a medical marijuana company, and he's actually going to be down here lobbying Congress in just a couple weeks.
It has changed so rapidly in just such a short amount of time. I feel like we have covered 7,200 topics, which is good, and really laid it out. I want to switch gears in a really big way to something we do a little more on our show. Before we wrap up, it's sort of our lighthearted look at DC. There's a lot of great stuff here in DC, as you know. So I want to do our segment we call the sauce. And the sauce is mumbo or any other kind of sauce. It's the stuff that makes DC great, and it's the local flavor that we want to introduce people from around the country to here in the district. So it's an acronym. I have 5 questions. I hope you have answers for them, and if not, we will muddle our way through this.
I looked at the questions and I forgot all the questions, but I'm gonna do the best I can.
So the first one is the only one that has a restriction on it. It's a sports team, but they have to play inside the district. But it can be any level, Pee Wee to pro. Yeah.
See, I mean, this is one of those areas where I'm just not well positioned. I used to play sports, but I'm not a sports fan. No, I used to do, and this is an answer to another question later too. When I did a White House internship, I went and volunteered at Benjamin Banneker High School, and we used to watch the basketball games there. So I would say the kids playing at Benjamin Banneker.
Banneker's basketball team. Huh?
Yep.
That'll work.
It's totally a cop-out answer. Sorry, Nats.
God, they're on fire. Like
I know, they just destroyed the Cincinnati Reds.
Runs in 5 games or something. It's been insane.
But I'm from Ohio. So,
the next one is A, which is public art. But I'm going to pause because I saw you got a Banksy at a yard sale?
At Goodwill. At Washington Goodwill.
So apparently the best place to buy art at the moment is the Washington Goodwill.
Dude, I don't want to put that on. I don't want other people going there. No. Yeah, no. I was in a Goodwill by my house, and I was flipping through things, and I saw, I was like looking at a stool with my wife, and I saw over there was just like this one panel that just looked like concrete, and I'm like, that's weird. And I walked over, and then I realized like there was 3, and I flipped it open, and it was the girl with balloons that Banksy had painted on the wall in Palestine that separates that cuts through Jerusalem. And I was just like, it was a blue tag, and it was Blue Tag Week. So I got it for $12.50, all 3 panels. I was like, yep.
And do you have any idea if it's authentic or not?
Oh, it's super not.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
I mean, no, they didn't cut down the wall. No, it's a total reprint. But no, I am stoked now that it is hanging in my living room.
So outside of your living room, what is your favorite art? Public art, museums, sculptures, murals, whatever. We've got so much here.
I'm gonna say Ford's Theater. When I was a kid, I was in Death of a Salesman, and I got to see them do Death of a Salesman about a year and a half ago. And I went back twice. It was so good.
Wow, that's great.
So good.
I got to see Come From Away there before it went up to Broadway.
If I knew what that was, I would know what that is.
It's a musical.
Okay.
It was Tony nominated, but it was Tony nominated against Hamilton, and I just you know who won. So.
Yeah. No, I had to go up to Baltimore to go see Hamilton because I couldn't get tickets when it was here.
You'd probably be shocked to know I still have not seen it.
Hey, I just saw it 3 weeks ago.
I have not seen it, and I get grief, especially from the friends that I know that work in the ones that work in theater and the ones that work in politics. Both of them on Hamilton give me grief.
It brings people together.
It does.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can get into how much Hamilton lied and how much that created the problems that are the district's lack of statehood. Exactly. Maybe why I'm not a big fan of Mr. Alexander, but in any case, U is the next of our sauce topics. It's university, college, school, again, any level.
I'm going to stick with Banneker.
You're going to stick with Banneker. You're going to double up on Banneker.
I'm going to double up with Banneker.
The famous double down.
But I will say, just kind of overall of the local university grads that I've met and people who say that they went to school here, I'm not a fan of those people. I'm just going to make that blanket shade out there. People are like, if you meet somebody in like the first 5 minutes, they tell you that they went to university and it's like somewhere around here. I typically don't like that person, and it seems like something that they're so like excited to tell you about, and I'm just not into it.
All right. I'm not going to tell you where I went to school then.
But see, you didn't tell me in the first 5 minutes where we met.
If that's your lead item,
so it's a big turn off when they're like, whoa. I'm like, I don't care. You're not impressive. Like, it's a mark against you. Go Cleveland State Vikings.
There you go. The C is community or neighborhood.
I lived in Petworth for 4 years. I just moved to Brookland, but because I needed a house, my grandfather moved in with me. But Petworth was so like, it breaks my heart to see how the cranes of gentrification have pushed out a lot of the poor families there. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate to have found a rent controlled apartment there and lived there for 4 years, and we did some organizing locally, and I think. I wish that the city did a better job of affordable housing policies that were actually affordable to keep people in Petworth, because just the community there was a little bit everywhere, little bit of everyone. Yeah. Everyone could come together, and it was a really, really great neighborhood.
Cool. And the last one is E, which is event or festival.
My friends at the National Cannabis Festival would come at me if I didn't say the National Cannabis Festival, of which I technically am a policy co-chair for.
I feel like the Funk Parade might be a close second.
Yeah.
For the community that you represent.
There's that too. Marijuana is infused in all of the DC events now. That's a valid point. There was some local organizers who gave away a lot of joints at Trump's inauguration.
Right.
I'm going to say National Cannabis Festival. For those of you who aren't aware, it's every April. They've been getting the spots. They do a policy summit at the museum, which hopefully we'll find a new home for. Yeah. Where we get into the weeds about. I can't. I worked in the restaurant industry for 5 years. I can't purge that from my lexicon. So we talk about policy one day, and then the organizers, Carolyn Phillips and Layla Macklin, like they really built something amazing, and it's got something for everybody. There's art, and there's vendors, and there's great music, and they got half an army of food trucks out there, and it's a really, really nice event that they put together.
Yeah, DC Vote's been a sponsor of it for the last couple of years, and we've been there, and I've had the opportunity to speak from the stage, and they do a fantastic job. Yeah. And we've gotten amazing weather in the last couple of years, too, which has just been awesome. This year was gorgeous. Yeah. Actually, it got sunburned in the middle of April, so... Cool. Just a couple of quick programming notes for everyone. You can listen to all of our past episodes at www.statehoodmatters.com. You can join us next week for a very special episode of Statehood Matters. Our Director of Programs, Barbara Helmick, will be serving as the guest host, and it'll be her first podcast. So join us for that. She'll be joined by students from Howard University to talk about their efforts organizing for statehood. On September 10th, we will be back with all of the information you need for the upcoming hearing on September 19th. Be sure to connect with us on social media at DC_vote on Twitter, and DC Vote, it's just by itself on Facebook and Instagram. Where can you plugged it before? Let's do it again. Where can people find more information about NORML?
You can find more information NORML, NORML.org. Follow us on Facebook at NORML, Twitter at NORML. And looking forward to seeing all of you in person who can make it on the 19th at the hearing. I'll be there in solidarity. And no, Bo, thank you again so much for all you guys do here. This is great.
Thank you so much for being and joining us and bringing this perspective. I think it's an issue not everybody in the movement knows about.
Yeah.
And so it was great, and I really enjoyed it. So to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in or downloading. If you've got thoughts or ideas for any other statehood matter, you can reach us at info@dcvote.org. Thank you all, and have a fantastic day.